You're always the embarrassment, my family proclaimed every holiday. So when I bought my dream apartment, I hosted a huge party and sent invites to everyone but them. They discovered it on Instagram. The comments were glorious. I, 32M, never thought I'd be the type to orchestrate elaborate revenge, but here we are. Growing up in my family meant knowing your place in the hierarchy, and mine was firmly at the bottom. While my older brother excelled in everything from academics to athletics, I was the kid who spilled gravy on the white tablecloth every Thanksgiving and somehow always managed to say the wrong thing at the worst possible moment. The pattern started early. Family gatherings became performances where I was cast as the comic relief nobody asked for. My parents would introduce my brother as their successful son, the one with the engineering degree in the corner office, while I got a dismissive wave and comments about how I was still figuring things out. My cousins learned to expect entertainment from my mishaps, and my aunts perfected the art of the sympathetic head shake whenever my name came up. Last Christmas crystallized everything for me. I had just gotten a significant promotion at the marketing firm where I'd been grinding for 5 years, finally earning enough to move out of my cramped studio apartment. I was excited to share the news, thinking maybe this would be the moment my family saw me differently. Instead, when I mentioned my new position during dinner, my mother immediately redirected the conversation to my brother's latest business acquisition. When I tried to bring up my apartment hunt, my father chuckled and suggested I look into renting a room instead of biting off more than I could chew. But the real blow came when my cousin announced her engagement. As everyone gathered around to admire her ring and discuss wedding plans, my aunt made a comment that still burns in my memory. She mentioned how nice it would be to have a family wedding where everyone could bring their significant others and celebrate properly, then looked directly at me and added that it would be refreshing not to have any awkward situations or embarrassing moments for once. The table went quiet for a beat before nervous laughter filled the air, and the conversation moved on as if nothing had happened. I excused myself early that night, claiming I had work the next morning. Nobody protested or tried to convince me to stay. That's when I knew things had to change. The apartment hunting intensified after that. I wasn't just looking for a place to live anymore. I was searching for my Declaration of Independence. After 3 months of aggressive searching and some creative financing, I found it. A stunning 2-bedroom corner unit in a converted warehouse downtown, complete with exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view that made visitors stop mid-sentence. The rent was steep, but my promotion made it manageable, and the deposit wiped out most of my savings. It was worth every penny for what I had in mind. Moving day was a solitary affair. I hired professionals and spent the weekend arranging furniture and hanging artwork. The place transformed from an empty shell into something that felt genuinely mine. For the first time in my adult life, I had a space that reflected who I wanted to be rather than who my family expected me to remain. The housewarming party idea came to me while I was standing in my new kitchen, imagining all the ways this space could host gatherings. But instead of the usual suspects, I started thinking about the people who actually valued my company. Work colleagues who respected my ideas, friends from college who stayed in touch because they wanted to, neighbors from my old building who always had time for genuine conversation. I spent 2 weeks planning the event, sending invitations to everyone who had ever made me feel welcome and appreciated. The guest list grew to nearly 50 people, a mix of colleagues, old friends, and new acquaintances. I arranged for catering, hired a bartender, and even got a small live jazz trio for background music. The apartment would showcase not just my new living situation, but the life I'd built outside my family's narrow expectations. The decision to exclude my family wasn't immediate. Initially, I considered inviting them out of obligation, imagining how they might react to seeing my success firsthand. But every scenario I played out ended the same way. My father would find something to criticize about my choices, my mother would make passive-aggressive comments about the cost, and my brother would somehow make the entire evening about himself. The party would become another stage for their familiar drama, with me playing the supporting role in my own home. So I didn't invite them. Not a single relative received an invitation. For the first time in my life, I was creating an event where I wouldn't have to brace for embarrassment or deflect subtle insults disguised as family humor. The party exceeded every expectation. My apartment filled with laughter and meaningful conversations. Colleagues who had only known me in professional settings got to see my personality without corporate constraints. Old friends marveled at the space and the transformation they could see in my confidence. New acquaintances became genuine connections as we talked late into the evening about everything from career ambitions to travel dreams. My former neighbor brought her boyfriend, who turned out to be a photographer. He spent the evening capturing candid moments. Groups clustered around the kitchen island sharing stories, people admiring the view from my windows, the jazz trio playing while couples danced in my living room. The photos were beautiful, spontaneous shots that showed my apartment as a space where people genuinely wanted to be. The photographer asked if I minded him posting some shots on social media, crediting my place as the venue. I agreed without thinking much about it. By Monday morning, the photos were scattered across Instagram, Facebook, and even LinkedIn. Friends who attended were tagging each other and sharing memories from the evening. The apartment looked stunning in every shot, and more importantly, I looked happy and confident hosting in my own space. That's when my phone started buzzing with messages from family members. My cousin was the first to reach out, asking why she hadn't heard about my new place or the party. Her tone was casual, but I could detect the underlying confusion about being excluded. My mother called an hour later, claiming she had heard from someone that I'd moved and wanted to know why I hadn't told the family. When I mentioned that I'd been busy getting settled, she asked about visiting, as if my silence had been an oversight rather than a deliberate choice. But it was my aunt who provided the most satisfaction. She called demanding to know why the entire family had been excluded from what she called such an important milestone. She had seen the photos through mutual connections and couldn't understand how I could host such an elaborate celebration without including family. When I reminded her of her comment about avoiding embarrassing moments at family gatherings, the line went quiet for several long seconds before she tried to backtrack, claiming she never meant anything personal. The social media comments became a source of unexpected vindication. Colleagues praised the apartment and the atmosphere, calling it one of the best parties they'd attended all year. College friends expressed genuine happiness about my success and promised to visit soon. Even acquaintances from the party left comments about what a wonderful host I'd been and how they hoped to be invited to future gatherings. What struck me most were the private messages from people who had attended. Several mentioned how refreshing it was to be at a social event where everyone seemed genuinely glad to be there, where conversations flowed naturally without underlying tension or family drama. One coworker specifically commented on how different I seemed in my own space, more relaxed and confident than she'd ever seen me at office functions. Update 1. The family's reaction escalated over the following weeks. My brother, who rarely initiated contact unless he needed something, suddenly became very interested in my living situation. He stopped by unannounced one evening, claiming he was in the neighborhood and wanted to see the place. His surprise at the apartment's quality was barely concealed behind casual compliments. He walked through each room, making observations about the rent costs and questioning whether I could sustain the lifestyle long-term. His visit felt like reconnaissance, and I was proven right when my parents called the next day, suggesting we meet for dinner. They had questions about my finances and wanted to understand how I'd managed such a significant upgrade without family assistance. The subtext was clear. They couldn't reconcile their image of me as the family disappointment with evidence of my independent success. During that dinner, my father made what he probably considered a generous offer. He suggested I could save money by moving to a smaller place and investing the difference, with him providing guidance on better financial planning. My mother added that a smaller space would be more practical for someone in my situation, whatever that meant. Neither acknowledged that my current apartment represented exactly what I wanted and could afford. The conversation revealed how deeply they'd internalized their narrative about my limitations. Even confronted with concrete evidence of my success, they couldn't adjust their expectations. Instead, they found ways to suggest I was overextending myself or making impractical choices that would eventually require their intervention. I left that dinner knowing I'd made the right decision about the party. Their presence would have transformed my celebration into another opportunity for them to reinforce their diminished view of my capabilities. Instead, I'd created an evening that reflected my actual relationships and achievements, free from their limiting perspectives. Update 2. The Instagram photos continued generating positive responses for weeks after the party. People shared them in stories, tagged friends who hadn't attended, and used them as inspiration for their own gatherings. My apartment became known among my social circles as a great entertaining space, leading to invitations to host book club meetings, birthday dinners, and casual get-togethers. Each successful event reinforced my confidence and expanded my social network. I realized I'd been operating under my family's assumptions about my social skills when the reality was quite different. Away from their critical environment, I was actually a natural host who enjoyed bringing people together and creating welcoming atmospheres. The contrast became stark when my brother invited me to his housewarming party the following month. Despite his larger house and bigger budget, the event felt formal and uncomfortable. Conversations stayed surface level, and most guests seemed to be there out of obligation rather than genuine interest in celebrating with him. His wife spent the evening managing logistics while he networked with people who might be useful to his business. I stayed for an appropriate amount of time and left without fanfare. Several relatives commented on how nice it was to see me, as if my presence was unexpected rather than routine. The same aunt who had criticized my exclusion of family from my party made a point of telling me how glad she was that I'd come, suggesting that family events weren't the same without everyone present. Her comment struck me as particularly ironic, considering how easily family events had proceeded without me for years. My absence had never been treated as a loss before, but my exclusion of them had suddenly become a significant slight. The double standard was obvious but unsurprising. Update 3. 6 months later, my apartment had become the regular venue for my friend group's monthly potluck dinners. These gatherings grew organically from connections made at the original housewarming party, evolving into a reliable social tradition that people genuinely looked forward to attending. The monthly dinners represented everything my family gatherings had never been: relaxed, inclusive, and genuinely enjoyable. People brought dishes they were excited to share rather than obligations they felt pressured to fulfill. Conversations ranged from lighthearted to meaningful, without anyone feeling judged or diminished. New faces were welcomed warmly rather than scrutinized for entertainment value. My family's attempts to insert themselves into my new social life continued sporadically. My mother occasionally mentioned wanting to meet my friends, while my father suggested I host a family dinner in my new space. Each suggestion carried the implicit assumption that I should want their involvement and approval. But the most telling moment came during my birthday celebration, which I hosted as another gathering of chosen friends rather than family obligation. The evening was perfect. Intimate dinner followed by drinks and conversation that lasted until nearly midnight. The photographer friend from the original party documented the evening again, capturing moments of genuine celebration and connection. When those photos appeared online, my cousin commented asking why family birthdays had been replaced by friend celebrations. Her question revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of what had changed. I hadn't replaced family traditions. I'd simply created new ones that actually brought me joy. The old traditions had been obligations disguised as celebrations, events where my presence was expected but not necessarily valued. The new traditions were choices made by people who actively wanted to spend time together, creating memories worth preserving and repeating. Looking back at that Christmas dinner where my aunt wished for family events without embarrassing moments, I realized she got exactly what she wanted. Their family gatherings now proceed without any risk of my awkward contributions or inappropriate comments. Meanwhile, I've discovered that I was never actually the embarrassment they claimed I was. I was just someone whose personality didn't fit their narrow expectations of family dynamics. The apartment became more than just a living space. It became proof that their assessment of me had been wrong all along. The successful parties, meaningful friendships, and comfortable lifestyle demonstrated capabilities they had never bothered to recognize. Their surprise at my success revealed more about their limitations than mine. The revenge wasn't just excluding them from one party. It was building a life that thrived without their validation, creating relationships based on mutual respect rather than family obligation, and discovering my own worth outside their constraining narratives. Every successful gathering in my space was a quiet contradiction to their diminished expectations. The best part is that it doesn't feel like revenge anymore. It simply feels like living authentically, surrounded by people who appreciate rather than tolerate my presence. The family drama that once defined every holiday has been replaced by chosen celebrations with people who actually want to be there. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply proving them wrong by living well without them. The embarrassment they claimed I brought to family gatherings turned out to be their own discomfort with someone who didn't fit their prescribed roles. Once I stopped trying to earn their acceptance, I found plenty of people who offered it freely. The comments on those party photos were glorious not because they validated my worth, but because they reflected relationships built on genuine connection rather than familial obligation. That difference has made all the difference in how I see myself and how I choose to spend my time. Now, when holidays approach, I make plans with people who actually want my company. The family still expects me to fulfill old obligations, but those expectations no longer define my choices. I've learned the difference between being wanted and being expected, and I choose to spend my time where I'm genuinely wanted. The apartment is just brick and mortar, but it represents the space I created for my authentic self to flourish. Every gathering reinforces that the problem was never my personality or social skills. It was trying to force myself into relationships that had no room for who I actually am. That's a lesson worth every penny I spent on rent, every hour I invested in planning parties, and every family tradition I chose to leave behind.